Benvenuti, stiamo per iniziare la prossima sezione dove si parlerà di libri e di lettura condivisa attraverso i social media e in particolare una piattaforma che si chiama Readmill, della quale abbiamo il fondatore. Ma prima vorrei presentare Marco Ghezzi, che è il cofondatore di Bookrepublic, una piattaforma di editoria molto molto nuova. Magari tu, Marco, poi ci racconterai anche cosa fai in Bookrepublic, cosa fate. Buon divertimento.
Si sente, sì? Pronti? Dicevo, cercherò di parlare in inglese con lui. L'idea è che ci aspettiamo che ci siano molte domande, quindi ci sarà, credo, un microfono e siete assolutamente invitati. Henrik Breggren è il fondatore di Readmill, che è un software, un'app di lettura per il mondo iPhone e per il momento solo per il mondo iPhone, gli chiederemo anche del perché Android non esiste ancora. È una delle più avanzate e ha grandissime peculiarità per quanto riguarda il social reading. È possibile prendere note e adesso gli chiederemo di parlarne. Hi Henrik.
Hi.
I was trying to introduce you in Italian. It's easier for me.
Don't believe anything he says. I have no idea what he just said.
Good. That's exactly the point. So, tell us about Readmill.
Yeah.
How did it start? Where? Why?
Absolutely. So first of all, I just want to say it's great to be here in Milan. As a Swede that kind of emigrated to Berlin, it's great to even further extend my small tour around Europe. And Gianfranco also told me before that now, since this is in English, if we get really excited, we have to make sure we don't speak I don't speak too fast. And he meant me specifically, because I get easily very excited talking about reading, and I talk too fast. So then maybe you can kind of scream or jump or wave or do some kind of sign, and then I'll try to slow down a little bit. So Readmill is all about creating the best reading experience when consuming books on digital devices, like iPads, iPhones, Android devices, and so on and so forth. It was started approximately 2 years ago in a very small apartment in Stockholm, where me and my co-founder David had moved in to create a new company. And Readmill is really much created out of the frustration over that the experience where we consume books weren't good enough. A lot of people that were developing these apps, applications that Apple were doing with iBooks, that Amazon was doing with the Kindle, we always thought it was a subpar experience. And what that means is, I can just give you a few examples. Some of the things that we really despised was that it felt like they've just taken books and slapped it onto a computer screen without making any even effort to make the experience any better, which we think there's a lot of potential to do. So, for example, iBooks has this, what I think is a kind of a horrendous fake wooden bookshelf with really, 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 really small pictures, so you have to kind of look at the screen like this to see. And that's not what covers are supposed to be. They're supposed to be this kind of really nice, kind of colored and well-designed things that you look at in a bookstore. It doesn't really work on a digital screen. One other thing that's kind of a bit kind of less big, but I think still important, is the kind of fade page curl that iBooks has, and you see a 3D little animation when you curl the screen. And I just think that those things are there to make us more comfortable reading, because that's the way we're used to reading. But the problem is that when I start to compare that feeling on that screen to a real book, it just, it's ridiculous, because that feeling can never be as good as the real thing, right? A fake page curl or fake wooden bookshelf can never be as good as the bookshelf I find among the homes of my friends, for example. So for us, it just felt unnecessary to try to copy these artifacts. But instead, we wanted to build an experience that was made for digital devices. and that kind of used some of the things that we had available in phones and in tablets that weren't available in the physical artifact. And one of these things, obviously, was that we have access to a network, that we have access to all the books in the world, that we have access to our friends, that we have access to Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, all of these kind of great networks and services around that we use every day. So that was kind of the basis of it. We started to build kind of an app for iOS devices to try this out, and launched it a little over a year ago, and people seem to appreciate that we actually put some real effort into making that experience into something totally different. I mean, it's still reading, right? And it's still about the core values of reading, like well-designed typography, for example, and kind of creating a calmifying technology, or creating a calm experience that doesn't disturb you too much when reading. We call it, I think my co-founder David's name is distraction-free reading, which sounds a very fancy name for what we're doing. But I think that a lot of other people didn't spend so much time as we did in designing it. And one of the main things that we found out was that if you actually spend time in designing a really good reading experience, people will also spend more time reading books on your platform. So it's actually, from a business perspective, it's a great way to spend your time and money to make sure that people can spend as much time as possible inside of these applications.
I just want to say, you mentioned you started in Stockholm. Mm-hmm. How is that there is this kind of a new Sweden coming with Spotify that just launched in Italy, and then you, and then there are a lot of new startups coming out from the north and in general from Europe. You think there is something happening in a more general way, or is it just globalization?
I mean, I definitely think it's part globalization, right? I mean, Sweden is a small country in the north. The main reason is that it's very dark in Stockholm. So we can't do anything else but work for like 10 months of the year.
That would be true also in Italy, but I'm not so sure it is. For the winter.
I think I think the Swedish government has invested a lot of money especially in technology education over the last 10 years, or 20 years maybe even. And we've also seen some kind of early, really big successes in technology for Swedes, like Skype, for example, and Kassa.
That's true, yeah. Ericsson.
For Ericsson, which is perhaps not so successful today,
it used to be.
And lately Spotify and SoundCloud and so on. And of course, those kind of protagonists in the scene, they really inspire others and to start their own companies as well.
So you went to the let's say, usual cycle of having an idea, raising the money, improving the idea, raising another institute of money, or?
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. I mean, except that when you say it like that, it sounds so easy. It weren't exactly easy like that. We actually did a big trip around Europe and even around the US when we were trying to raise money and trying to improve the idea. And it was a lot of crying and a lot of panicking involved in making that happen. But yeah.
Yeah. Back to reading then. I'm going to ask a few questions to the audience. Let's see if they read online, if they read on tablets or ink. Di voi c'è qualcuno che usa oggetti di inchiostro, device con inchiostro elettronico, Kindle, cose simili? Tablet, quindi iPad, iPhone? Wow. Niente di tutto questo e legge dei libri di carta?
Physical.
That's physical. Quelli voi che leggete, siete iscritti a qualche social network in cui parlate di libri, Anobi, Ghezzi o cose simili? Okay. Mm-hmm. So I think we got a pretty mixed audience. We got everything. So,
but I think the trend is clear, right? I mean, when you asked about phones, it was clear that was the biggest group.
So you think that reading in phones is going to be bigger?
I mean, when we started 2 years ago, when I said 2 years ago, it just feels like it's a very short amount of time. But what has happened in 2 years in books and in reading and in the digital space is just enormous, right? But then we thought that tablet was going to be the thing. So we started building Readmill for tablets. That was what everybody was going to have, and everybody was going to spend a lot of time reading on these devices, which I think is partly true. But if somebody would have said to me that, 2 years ago that iPhone is now going to be the leading reading platform, or Android phones or phones in general is going to be I would probably be quite hesitant, I have to say. But today it's true. It's been, for us, we just launched our iPhone version just, I think, a week, 2 weeks ago maybe, not even. And it's seen some awesome traction across the world. And it's also been, for the last 6 months, I think, the absolute #1 feature request from the growing community of readers that we have. It's very apparent that, reading on phones is a big thing. Android, I mean, it was interesting also when we started talking about phones, because if reading has grown a lot, I mean, we can't even mention Android in the same sentence. Android has just had an incredible curve over the last year in growth. I sat down and had dinner with a big company in the US a while ago, and they said that Android was growing even faster than iOS on their platform currently, and I think this is true for some of the bigger social networks in the world. So obviously Android is a big thing for us. We're not there yet, but we definitely hope to be in a couple of months from now.
I see. So can you share us a few numbers about Readmill, the user base, you have any kind of indication how many is switching from iPad to iPhone, even it is very early stages? So
yeah, I mean, Readmill is still early stages, but the interesting thing is it's growing pretty fast, right? So I think now we're amassing user growth on something like 5% week to week. So we're seeing some really early trends that definitely the phone is picking up some serious traction. And what's interesting also, I mean, it's very early for us on phones still, so these numbers might change in the future, but we can really see now that more than 50%, I think more than slightly over 60%, and all of the time spent reading every day on our platform is now on phones, which I think is a very impressive number.
Only just after a few weeks?
After less than 2 weeks.
But since this was a trend also in New York. I was in a conference last week that there's more room for smaller reading, meaning not smaller in characters, obviously, but smaller in time spent reading. So kind of a new way of conceiving publishing for the little time we have to spend. And probably iPhones are exactly the right tool to it, because you can read when you commute, you can read when you are waiting on the line, and so on. Do you have any kind of information about this? I mean, I know you count page numbers and things like that, okay? You have any indication in this sense, or meaning there is more and more smaller text, or?
You mean that the length of the books that people read are shorter? I actually don't know that on top of my head, but from a Readmill perspective, but from a general perspective, I think definitely that this is true, that people are focusing on reading the things that people read are getting shorter and shorter. I mean, that's been like a mega trend, and that's been with the web and the internet for the past 10 years. This kind of snack culture that things are becoming shorter and shorter, and I think that's true for books as well. I mean, what was interesting, I don't know, Amazon launched something called Kindle Singles. I don't know if it was 1 or 2 years ago, probably 1 year ago.
And something, yes.
And Amazon doesn't share anything of how they make this decision, but the rumor was that it was a decision based on that they could see a trend in Kindle users that they weren't actually finishing the books that they were buying. So they could say that a lot of people were dropping off somewhere between 50 and 100%. So they decided to launch an experiment with a series of novels that were shorter and featuring them on the Kindle store. And again, this is only speculation, but I think it's been quite successful, and since they're still active and they're still putting out new Kindle singles all the time.
It is true that with Amazon, you always have the sensation that they count on quantity, never on quality.
Yeah.
I dropped the book with these stories, it's not good, you see? No, it's too long. That's really a way of measuring things that kind of hassled me a little bit. You know?
Yeah, it's an interesting take on that decision.
Yeah, it's never the quality that matters.
No,
really.
it's never the quality.
And since in Readmill, users, or better, readers, are connected to one another, how many, in the sense, you see also that it's growing the connections, or one start with 10 connections, that's it for his life?
Yeah, let me show you, let me just share a little bit how Readmill works. So how we actually differentiate this in a few different ways, right? So we store an ebook library for you on the web, so you can access it from your phone or from your tablet whenever you synchronize that seamlessly across devices. But what's interesting also is that inside of the book, you can share any passage from the book you're reading to your friends, and also, of course, to other social networks that like Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr and so on. And we do this in a way which is not so disruptive to your kind of reading experience. It just takes you a highlight and one tap to kind of save that highlight as you go along. And you can do that for a bunch of different reasons. Maybe you found something funny in the book that you want to share with a friend, or maybe it's something interesting, maybe it's some kind of fact that you want to save and go back to later and reference, or maybe it's just something that kind of maybe you remembered something when you were reading it and you want to collect it and so you can have it saved and remembered, right? So all of these things. And we store all of those highlights for you as well, so you can go back to them and you can share them with friends, and people can see, what are the interesting things that you are seeing in this book. And from a personal perspective, it can be valuable for all the above-mentioned reasons. But when you look at it from a macro perspective, it's also very interesting, because you can kind of get an idea of what the most interesting things are for all the people that are reading this book. So you get a really kind of great way of figuring out what are the interesting parts in this book, and all of them are kind of a micro recommendation to friends and peers that is much more relevant than just saying, this book is great, I think you should read it. It's more, look at this passage, I thought about you when I was reading it, I think you should read it too. And we think that that's much more relevant. It would be great
for students, like buying underlined books.
For example, for students, it's really, really great, right? I was always looking for underlined books in the library when I was in school. But there was one problem with that, obviously, because when I went to the library, I looked through and I found a book that was underlined. But then the question was, is the girl or the guy who underlined this book, is he or she smarter or dumber than me? And I could never figure out, right? So, but now with Readmill, it's easier, since I can actually see who did those underlines. So I'll ask, what did you get? Did you get an A or a B in the course? Hopefully they will answer truthfully.
There is a kind of a network of trust in which you kind of rely in choosing the highlights and choosing the books and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that's one of the main concepts, right? That it's Readmill is one of the main points is to help you find the next book to read. And we think friends are the best way of finding out what that next book should be. Maybe even better than the recommendation algorithms that we see on, for example, Amazon, which is, people have bought this has also bought this, right? So I think that peer-to-peer and kind of friendly recommendations are, in a sense, much better to figure out what the next book should be.
Yeah.
So let me get back to your question. So connections, obviously the network is growing as well. Absolutely. I think that a lot of people are interested in sharing what they're reading, because it's such a kind of self-defining thing to do. It's like what kind of books you read says a lot about who you are as a person. And I think this is in a way much more important than sharing vacation photos or what you had for lunch. So I think definitely, sharing of literature and reading is super important. And so our network effect is growing a lot, but it's also it also follows the kind of long tail distribution curve, right? So we have some people that have a lot of followers and that are following a lot of people and that are very engaged in the community, and we are some people that are more interested in kind of taking notes by themselves and just using Readmill as a great way to read books.
Yes.
I think somewhere around like 20% is actually active highlighters in the platform. So 20% are highlighting and sharing those highlights with other people.
Then you're really on the Pareto line, the equation.
Exactly.
It's a long tail one. I see. Back to reading. I have an EPUB because we are talking about EPUB files. So Readmill can digest EPUB files. So I have an EPUB on my computer. I can upload it to Readmill. And it doesn't matter if it has any kind of protection on top of it or not, right? Because you can connect with the Adobe DRM, and then I really would like to have your take on DRM stuff.
Well, I mean, I think it's like copy protection and DRM and things like that are quite. It's not very interesting because it's not interesting for kind of the general reader in a way. It's just a technical issue that we as a technical company have to solve, right? If we want to offer a service, we have to solve those kind of problems, kind of a part of the deal, right? But let me outline how the world looks today from our perspective. And in digital books today, we kind of have 3 different islands, I would say. The big island in the West. That's, of course, Amazon, the big forest island. And they have somewhere around, I think, 50%, over probably 50% of the market today or something like that, especially in the US and the UK. And then we have a small island, which is Apple, which is somewhere over 5%, I think, or maybe even 7% these days. And then we have the rest, which is kind of a more rougher, more fragmented, a big island, but it's still more hard to get. And that's kind of where we are, where there's full of great companies, independent publishers, independent retailers, that are all trying to figure out the best way how to cater to their customers. And we are really trying to help this kind of third independent island to do that. And it's a big island. It's almost as big as the Amazon island.
In which way you are going to help them? I mean, Readmill is quite an independent platform in itself. There is no commerce going on over there, but you kind of allow people that has bought, for example, DRM protected file to read them on top of Readmill.
Yeah.
So what's the interaction with, for example, what the interaction with Bookrepublic could be?
Yeah. So what we're doing, obviously, what's amazing about Apple and Amazon, and just to mention it, if that was unclear, that these islands are totally disjoint. Like you cannot buy a book from anywhere else and put that you cannot buy a book from Amazon and put that in Readmill, for example, or you cannot buy a book from Amazon and put that in your iBooks app on your iPad or on your iPhone. So there's a lot of complicated stuff in there, but. How we are trying to kind of join these forces of the last big island is really to improve the user experience and to make it as easy as possible for users to get from buying to reading, right? And there's been some hurdles involved, but what I think is so amazing with other platforms, and especially these kind of big platforms that have stores integrated and so on, and it's not the actual reading and it's not the actual applications and so on. They're actually not very good. What I think is amazing is when you buy a book and then it's just on your device and you can start reading it immediately. That's the kind of fantastic thing, and that's the thing that we wanted to recreate with Readmill. So we're working now with around, I think, 40, soon to be 50 stores all around the web, which use us as the kind of default reading experience. And what this means is that when you buy a book from them, at the end, when you've paid for the book and when you can download it, next to the download button, there's also another button which says, send it to Readmill. And you click this button once, you pick up your iPhone, and it downloads automatically, and you can start reading. And you know it works, because it's a store that we have tried out, that we have kind of curated, and we've integrated with them, so we know that that whole flow works. And by that, we're establishing trust, not only with readers, but also with retailers and publishers all across the world. And so this is something that I hope we're going to do with Bookrepublic as well in the future.
Yeah, we are working on it. It was kind of a pun.
Shaming you on stage
shame on
always
us.
works.
That's shame on us, that's true. This means also that you're going to be, so to say, agnostic for what is e-commerce. There will be never e-commerce inside Readmill. I know it's a hard statement to make now, but
I mean,
let's say for the next 6 months.
Yeah, you can never say never, but currently there's no plan of doing commerce inside of Readmill, because I mean, there is this, and I actually had that written down as well. I think there's a lot of uncertainty and trust issues with building a social service where people are supposed to give reviews and invite friends and kind of write their inner thoughts about things they've read, at the same time trying to sell them something. I don't really believe in that in that model, and I think that one of the reasons why Goodreads, for example, is so strong today in this kind of you shelve a book and you say that this is on my to-reading list. One reason why it's so strong is because they haven't moved into retail. So I think it is probably possible to do really well, but it's really hard.
And regarding reading and the reading time, what kind of statistics you gather? I mean, aggregated ones. Time in which people read the most?
Yeah.
You can also kind of say people read the most at night, this kind of genre or the other. So what's coming out that seems to be quite...
Well, I mean, so what you're talking about is obviously questions that you want to answer, right? I mean, the data that we collect is rather broad. Like things like when are you spending time, how much are you spending time, how fast do you read, and all of these things are things that we're bringing back to the reader in forms of this is the amount of time that you have to spend to actually finish the book. So when you go on vacation, you can actually figure out if you have time to finish it on the beach or not. But I mean, I think what you're asking is what kind of questions can we answer? And that in itself is a really good question, because I think we are still trying to figure out the most relevant questions. Are publishers and authors and readers interested in, how fast are people reading my book? I don't know.
So you collect a huge amount of data.
Well, it is pretty significant, but it all depends on how many people are using the platform, obviously.
Yes.
But it's normal data that we collect, and it's all available as well for every user, obviously.
So it could be useful if I am a publisher. It could be useful to know when people is reading my book, meaning not necessarily during the day, but also during the year. I can come up with the fact that everyone is bringing my book on vacation, but no one is reading them during winter. Yeah. I don't know what that means, but...
But what's interesting here is that when we talk to publishers, and I talked to a publisher last year, and he said, rather big publisher in the UK, and he said, Henrik, every time I sit down with my marketing team, I do, at the end of the year, and I'm going to do my figure out our marketing spend across the UK. We look at previous year's sales statistics, and they get that month by month then, or something like that, which is in the kind of digital world very, very, very slow. Yeah. But the interesting thing is that they get it per country. So here you have a huge country like the UK, but you have no idea if the books are actually bought and read in London, in Edinburgh, or if in anywhere else in the UK. So when they sit down, they sit down and they say like, so how are we going to spend our marketing dollars? Where is the author going to go? Is he going to go for 5 events in London, or are we going to focus on some other, or on the countryside, or what are we going to do? They're just saying like, let's just do it the same thing as last year, because they still have no idea. And this is one of the things that we obviously want to help them with, to in an easier way connect readers and authors and make them spend their time in a better way, and kind of tell them, you have a huge fan base in this little town, you should probably go there and meet them. And also being able to send them a message saying, great that you read my novel. I'm so happy that you liked it. I'm coming out with my sequel in 1 month. Let me know if you want to have it like an exclusive preview, or get on a list where you will be sent an email when it's out, or things like that. So it's really about creating these kind of great connections between authors and readers in a kind of lean way, in an easy way, where authors themselves can interact and so on, so don't have to go through the publisher.
You're also kind of describing in which way your business is going to focus, meaning it could be business to consumer on the point that you kind of release a platform in which readers read, but they don't spend any money.
Yeah.
On the other side will be business to business, because this kind of information is going to be very useful to publishers, authors, wholesalers, distributors, bookstores, libraries, whatever.
What's happened in the last 10 years with big retailers is that they have kind of spliced themselves in the value chain between the publisher and the reader, right? So today, if somebody buys a book on the iTunes store, the publisher doesn't know who that person is, where they come from, how old they are. They don't know anything, basically. And we think this is really bad for the book industry in general. So with Readmill's more kind of distributed store model, we share that information. So the retailer gets all the customer information about which book did they buy, and when did they buy it, and where did they come from, and how did they pay, and so on. And we also get some of the reading data that we then package into insights and deliver back to the publisher to create a better book industry for everyone.
Okay. There is any question? C'è qualcuno che facciamo una pausa domande? Se c'è qualcuno ha qualche domanda, io ne ho un altro paio altrimenti.
Hi, my name is Luca. I would have many questions, but I will start with
one at a time.
Just with one.
Just one at a time.
We love questions.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of ebooks. I started reading ebooks more than 3 years ago. My favorite ebook reader is Kindle, and e-ink device. I think it's the best way to enjoy ebooks. So I'm very sympathetic with you and with your app, but I don't buy Readmill as a success in the future, because I don't think that app on iPad or iPhone will be the best way to read. But anyway, I would be very curious about your business model, because you don't sell ebooks. You just have a relationship with bookstores, and I read online that your business model should be about bigger relationship with the publishers. So if you can elaborate on that, I would be very happy to hear you. And that's it.
Sure. Thank you. I can just start by talking about Kindle. I mean, I think Kindle is a great way of enjoying books, but the trends are clear, right? We've seen over the past 6 months that the sales of e-ink devices and these kind of single-purpose devices are clearly going down. And even Amazon is realizing this. In the last kind of a big hardware announcement they made, they released 3 tablets and 1 e-ink device. That's kind of inverse from what they did just a year earlier. So they are also realizing, and they are 100% surely developing a phone as well. I'm very, very sure of that fact. I think there is a lot of people in the world who will always like the e-ink device better, because it's lighter, it's smaller, it doesn't have all the features and things that you get disturbed and so on. There's 100 of reasons why.
Or physical books, though.
Exactly, and that was my next point. There will always be also people that will only read physical books because they like that. That's totally cool. I mean, obviously, we don't think that Readmill is going to be used by well, I shouldn't say that. We do think that it will be used.
You better.
No, but by every single person on the whole planet, right? But I think that the mega trend here is that we're going to have one device that we're going to carry with us 24 hours a day, that it's going to be available all the time, whether it's, sitting on the couch with kind of drinking a glass of red wine by the fireplace, this kind of classical picture when you picture someone reading a good novel, right? But also in a very stressful minute in the Tokyo subway. So there's only one device which we're going to carry with us on all of these moments, and that's going to be the phone. And it's hard to argue with that, even though a lot of people like to. So, I mean, I think I talked a little bit about the business model now, but I'll reiterate again that there is no plan for us for now to sell books. That's true, and that might seem a bit weird. But I think that a lot of the business for publishers in the future, just as it is for record labels and other media companies today, is about fostering the relationship between the author, publisher, and the reader. This relationship has been totally disrupted by big retail players, but we are now going to see publishers and authors. We already see authors trying to build up this relationship again, mostly through social media, like Facebook and Twitter and so on, but obviously books is a huge market. And these other social networks, they contain a lot of other stuff that doesn't belong maybe in the same context as the book, right? So I think there's definitely room for not one, but actually multiple networks which fosters the relationship between authors and publishers. And if you make that into the best tool available, I think it's also a great business from a monetary standpoint.
Qualche altra domanda? Io stavo cercando di seguire. I was trying to following on Twitter.
Okay. Yeah. Is there any? If there is any hate, I can just say it's funny. I don't know if you know an author called Baratunde Thurston. He used to be editor-in-chief over the Onion in the U.S. He's the author of a book, How to Be Black, and he wrote actually an article about the Kindle and about phones and readers. And I just want to read that quote for you because it's really funny. He said that the ebook platform Readmill makes the Kindle look like a stone tablet in the way it lets readers compare content and share it with friends. I think that's a stone tablet is a good analogy. Yes. I like that.
So I have one question for you. Since you can upload your own files on Readmill, do you see any trends in not legit files, meaning that I can upload files that came from torrent sites or pirate sites or things like that? You also keep numbers on this, and you have any kind of indication? Because that's with DRM we try to stop piracy. I don't think that's the right answer, but then it's publishers that decide this, so whatever they want. But
the thing is, since Readmill is kind of a social platform, the idea is that you share with friends what you're reading. If you download a book on a pirate site, I don't think you want to read it in a reader which emphasizes on you sharing a file that sharing that you're reading a book which you've actually pirated.
You think so?
So I think we've invested heavily in building up a network where kind of trust is built in, right? Not only by using design, but also by using, great way of communicating what you do and what is allowed and so on. I think that kind of defeats the whole purpose of piracy.
But the shelf can also be private, so I don't need to share it if I don't want to.
I mean, you can't, but it's kind of irrelevant, right? Because the whole idea of Readmill is that you use kind of the social and get more value out of reading the book by using these features. So, if you don't want to do that, you can you might as well just use Kindle or use any of the other 500 ebook readers there are on iOS, right? So so it doesn't. So I think if somebody wants to pirate a book and read it in a reader on an iPhone and an iPad, I think that Readmill is one of the absolute worst ways of doing that.
Okay. We were talking about word of mouth for spreading about the chance that I have a good book to read next to the one I'm reading.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's the way it is. Word of mouth is the magical kingdom for every publisher.
Yeah.
Everybody hopes to have the magic formula to get that. Okay, but nobody has. So, and then we have the 50 Shades of Grey. So that's
Sure.
back. I was wondering, can you also, in a way, track in which way a reader influences another, or there is any path you see, in meaning that the next book is maybe from another shelf that one is following, or do you have any information about this you can share? Or at least a feeling.
Yeah,
numbers are huge.
I mean, definitely. I mean, the whole point of a network is to get kind of, you know, information spreading through that network in an effective way, and by bringing down the threshold to contribute and to say, like, you know, I'm reading this book and this is what I thought about it and so on. Of course, that information travels, I mean, that's exactly the point of the network. And we can see, I mean, I don't have any numbers or anything to back this up, but we can definitely see, you know, that people are influencing others. And I mean, just from myself, you know, I read so much better books these days by using Readmill than I was before by just using other recommendation engines, or actually waiting until I came to a dinner with friends on a Saturday to ask them what books they were reading. And then, you know, there was a lot of red wine involved, so I always forgot what it was and I had to call them the day after. But now I can actually see and I can delve into that when I'm actually interested, right? So I think, you know, that is the way we will discover books in the future, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you can see lots of other people, you know, trying to make this happen. I mean, Facebook is definitely, you know, interested in books and are going to build a lot more around books in the future. I'm sure of that.
Yeah, definitely. Qualche domanda ancora? Siamo stati così esaurienti? Una domanda là. C'è un microfono forse?
Hi. I was thinking about suggesting content and discovery and discoverability, and because this is one of the things that Readmill can do. So I was just thinking about that. People read because it's passionate about something, about the topic, about the subject. But we are all here talking about reading books. What about all the other kind of content that people want to engage with and that is interesting? Say that I'm interested in cyberpunk and I want to know everything about cyberpunk. So I just limit suggestion to books and not to every other kind of content we have available on the net.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, it's a good question, and I've heard this question from a lot of people, like not only from users, but also, of course, from venture capitalists and other kind of people that are interested in seeing what their vision is. And I think, don't you think that books deserve their own thing somehow?
I don't personally.
You don't? Okay, you don't. Well, I do. I think books is such an amazing thing. And what's interesting about books is that if you look at the web today, you can search for some kind of topic or something, and let's say you search for a book. What do you find actually about this book? You find the cover of the book, you find the title, you find maybe like a rating or a review or something. But what's the interesting thing about a book? It's the thing between the covers, right? It's the story, it's the facts, it's the amazing thing that lies between that you don't get. So we really see books as like today on the web as like an iceberg of opportunity. And, you know, there's only, and what is the, now I forgot the number, but it's like 90% of the iceberg is under the surface of the water, right? And it's totally inaccessible because you're not really interested in the cover and the title. You're interested in, you know, what's it about, and you know, what would I get when I read it, and so on. And I think that's a problem that has not been solved. And let me tell you, that's a big enough problem for a small company out of Berlin to try and solve. So we'll start with that, and then we'll see how that works out.
Just one more thing.
But you have to do it because otherwise they can't hear it on the
Microphone.
One more question.
She was distracted.
Otherwise they can't hear it on the stream. Important.
Just one more thing. You are totally right about the book being something else because it's not networked yet, because it's still somehow offline. Also, ebooks are somehow offline, are not accessible, are not linkable, and so we must dig the content and what really matters in them outside and put it on the net. But in my view, it's not going that much time to take ebooks online. That's all.
Well, I think, okay, it's great that you don't think it's going to take so much time. I think it's a major challenge. I think that, it's one of the things that Google tried to do, and I don't know, but they have somehow dubbed Google Books as one of the hardest things that Google has ever tried to do. It's not yet done. It's very far from perfect, right? And I mean, these are the guys that build the best search engine in the world, and they can't figure out how to do books in the best way. So I think it's, I like that you're opportunistic, but I think it's actually quite complicated.
Thank you.
How many people is working in Readmill right now?
So Readmill is now 12 people in Berlin, mostly engineers and designers.
Any plans to open in the United States or going there or doing something like that?
There's always plans to open elsewhere, right? I mean, US is our biggest market. I think over 60% of our users come from the US now. But obviously it's because of the market in the US is so much bigger for ebooks in general. And we've managed to go together with some really good independent stores in the US who are now selling books for us, or redirecting their readers into read books in Readmill, which is really awesome. And so that's probably because that number is so dominant. But we actually spend a lot of time in the US. Both me and Marissa, who's head of business development for us, is constantly on a plane, kind of front and back, and meeting people and so on. So we make it a big deal to have a big presence in the US. But we also really love Berlin, which is it's a fantastic city to run a company in these days. Lots of interesting things happening and so on, and it's perfectly located kind of in the middle of Europe. So a lot of people come there all the time.
Yeah. And if you have
lots of Italians there.
Yeah, there's a lot of Italians.
Yeah, it's great.
Getting away. Who knows why? And if you have to pick a country in Europe besides UK, that's a totally different story. That really is kind of growing in excess of what the expectations are, meaning Germany is a big country, reading is very strong there, but if you would say there is a country in which the use of Readmill in all its senses is growing, is astounding, what would you pick?
I mean, it's... well, so I don't know if I said, but I'm Swedish originally. So and Sweden has been this kind of, they've somehow missed the train on ebooks somehow. It's been growing very slowly, but it's definitely picking up speed now, and we have some really interesting collaborations with stores and other types of content outlets there over the next coming months. So Sweden is definitely going right now for us.
I hope so, because as you know, we are kind of co-hosting a conference over there. Our conference, eBook Then, is going to Sweden in Stockholm the 21st of March. So I hope so.
It's a
great,
very great,
kind of the desert. You know?
Good choice for the second edition of, or is it third edition of eBook Then?
Yeah. Gianfranco, you said there is a question more? Yes. From whom? From you or? You said we have time for one question. Okay. Who's be the last?
No more questions. Yeah.
Over there.
Great. Thank you for saving us here.
Hi, Henrik. I'm Marco. I'm engaged in social media, so I'm very interested in the social side of the social reading. Here we define reading, sharing, and discovering great books. First, what is your definition of social reading? Because I think this is very restricted.
Yeah.
The second one, some weeks ago, the CEO of the Mauri Spagnol Publishing Group pointed out about the great problem of self-publishing. A great number of e-books published without any control, any evaluation.
Yeah. Did he call it a problem?
He's a publisher.
I think that's amazing.
He's a publisher. He's a big problem for us.
That's not a problem. That's an opportunity. Yeah.
Maybe
okay.
he don't agree with this kind.
Okay.
So, the dark side of social reading, social self-publishing. What do you think about? Thank you.
That's a new way of saying
Yeah,
social self-publishing. I like it.
Dark side of publishing. Yeah. I don't agree with that. I think it's the bright side. Okay, let's start with the definition of social reading. Very good question, because I think this term is really complicated. Because sometimes mostly in the beginning that I presented Readmill, somebody said, "Oh, okay, but that's social reading. That's great. Does that mean that I have a Facebook chat on every page?" And I had to turn around, throw up, and then turn back and try to answer this guy. I mean, that would be the worst thing I could ever come up with. Social has this kind of problem that, for a lot of people it means that we should talk about everything all the time, which is obviously not true. So we're trying to actually get away from this term, social reading, now, and call it more shared reading, which means that, without disturbing you too much, you can actually collect an experience or collect the things that you think are interesting, and then when you're done, you have a page where you can review, what you think about the book and the most interesting parts, and your friends can of course discuss it in an easier way afterwards. So I think social reading for us is more letting you collect an experience and share that with friends after you read it. Also along the way in some sense, but without disturbing you. And let's see, how do I attack this dark side of
social self-publishing?
Social self-publishing.
We should sell it as a new, statement. That's very nice.
Social
self-publishing. Social publishing.
Making it possible for anyone to write a book and then publish it for free and reach readers all across the world. I don't understand how that can be a bad thing. That, for me, is amazing. But it also comes with a new set of problems, which I guess is the problems that this man is referring to, which is you can argue that there's going to be lots of variance in quality, obviously, of these books. Not all of them is going to be, a Franz Kafka or something like that. But that's up to, but I see that less as a problem and more as an opportunity for companies like Readmill, for example, to help users filter and search and make sure that readers find the good things among this mass of self-published books. But I think in the end, if we do it right, I think that definitely the quality in general of the books that people actually do read is going to go up, and I think that people are going to definitely read more and find more interesting content in general as well. So I just think that lowering that barrier and making everyone that wants to be an author the possibilities to be one is one of the great things that the internet's here for.
Okay. I think we are done. Are we? Thanks, Henrik.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for inviting me to this.
Okay. There we go.
Thank you.